Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer. Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com to learn more about the program or apply. Again, that's WolfNYC, WOLFNYC.com. Rabbi Daniel Lapin, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert. I've been looking forward to this. We've had some trouble getting things scheduled, but here we are, and I'm happy.
Yeah, I appreciate your flexibility.
No problem at all.
Yeah, had some unforeseen things going on in life. And I'm very excited to talk to you as well. Thank you for doing this. Just by way of quick introduction, you are a Jewish rabbi. You're the author of several books. You are the host of the podcast titled The Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show. And you are also one of the religious figures appearing in the God Bless Bitcoin documentary, which I think premieres July 2024.
Yeah, it's coming right up.
Yeah, coming right up. So before we get rolling, maybe I could just let you do a little bit of an expanded intro on yourself. You could mention the books you've written and maybe a little bit about your podcast as well.
Sure. My books have continued to sell very, very strongly because they ask a very fundamental question, Robert, and it's a question that can only be asked by a Jewish rabbi, because if anybody else would ask the question I ask as the foundation of my books, they would be instantly branded as an anti-Semitic bigot. I mean, you've got to be circumcised to be able to ask this question. And so it's probably one of the few cases in academia where the removal of a small piece of skin can convert bigotry to research. And that's what I did. The research I did was on a very simple question, and something which you'd have to be a blind immigrant from outer Mongolia not to know about. And that is that Jews are disproportionately good with money. Now, you're not supposed to say that. But anyone with eyes in their head knows that. In the United States of America, and I mean, I have audience and fans and followers all around the world, but in the United States of America, the Jewish population, it constitutes less than 1.5% of the 330 million Americans. And that means that the Forbes list of 400 richest Americans, 1.5% of them should be Jewish. And that means there should be 6 Jews on the Forbes 400 list. There's actually never fewer than 60. It's usually closer to 100. So that means overrepresented by an order of magnitude, which is extraordinary. And, I started researching that because I thought it was a really good question. What's causing it? And I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and one of the questions I asked, why do you think it is? And a lot of people said it's because Jews are smart. So I thought, well, let's take a look at the people with the highest IQ in America, and let's see whether, number one, they're Jewish, and number two, whether they are making good money. Well, the highest IQ, the smartest people in America, are on the faculties of universities. And anyone who has worked in finance, and I think you have and I have, knows the sad truism that almost nobody is worse with money than academics. And so that was one thing. The other thing we discovered was that very low IQ is fatal for making money. There was a movie years and years and years ago, I don't know if you remember, a movie called Forrest Gump.
Yes, of course.
With Tom Hanks. It was a really great movie. But the premise is completely ridiculous, which is that a guy with an operating IQ of 75 becomes a financial tycoon. It doesn't happen like that in real life.
Of course.
And the IQ distribution curve, the typical bell curve, down at one end of it has got a small, tiny proportion of the population that are very, very, very low IQ. They do not become wealthy. Let's just recognize that. Over at the other end, you've got an equally small, tiny sliver of the population who are super high IQ. Guess what? They don't make money either. Now, part of the reason for that is that the only way to make money is interacting with other people. And so if you're somebody who says, look, I want to make a lot of money, it turns out that I can do that by working in the waste removal industry or in the garbage collecting industry. And you say, well, the only thing is, I don't want anybody to know what I do. Then if you were a client of mine, I would tell you that's not going to work, because nobody can succeed at any activity of which he's embarrassed and ashamed, because you need to be able to proudly proclaim to everybody, this is how I serve other human beings. And so this is, I have to just make it, okay. Sorry, pardon me for that interruption. Right. I blocked out our time, and I thought I let everybody know, but there was one. All right. Anyway, not important. So, So because when you interact with people, if you're interacting with somebody who's way more intelligent and smarter than you are, you always feel uncomfortable. That's one of the reasons, that our mothers used to tell us when we were little, don't try and be too smart for your own good. Now, really, they say, don't be too dumb for your own good. But no, don't be too smart for your own good. You know why? Because nobody's really excited to be friends with the cleverest guy in the room. And so it turns out that IQ is not an explanation for Jewish financial success. I had to consider the possibility that one explanation is that Jews cheat, because I have a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary where the word Jew is treated not only as a noun, but also as a verb, as in to Jew somebody.
Right.
And so is that possible? And again, through interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people around the United States who had a lifetime's worth of doing business with Jews, the answer is, Jews have their Bernie Madoffs, Jews have their bad apples, but no more or less than any other demographic group. The fact is that a bad reputation spreads so quickly that, and particularly today where it's so easy to Google somebody, you will find remarkably quickly that there's nobody willing to do business with you anymore. And again, I want to stress, you make money by engaging in transactions with other people. Mm-hmm. You either provide things they need or you provide services that they need. And life's too short to do business with people with horrible reputations. Sure. So the idea that Jews routinely rob and pillage and steal turns out not to be true. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it might have been an explanation for why Jews do well over a very short period of time. You know, because if you are not hindered by any moral inhibitions, well, you know, you can do a lot of things till the word gets around, though. And once the word gets around, you're through. So the fact that Jews have done well over centuries in many countries, hospitable and wonderful countries, as well as in tyrannical regimes, suggests that, no, Jews generally have a reputation for keeping their word in business. And so it was, Robert. I went through a whole a slew of possible explanations. And when those had all played out, I was left with having to find out what really was the secret for why Jews do well in business. And the answer is that well, as a result of a certain book which came into Jewish possession about 3,300 years ago, and which became part of what we today call Western world thinking about 2,000 years ago, around about the time of Jesus, a little bit before that. Jews from that extracted a set of timeless truths that explain how the world, and the way I like to put it, if you'll pardon me, how the world really works. And that is how, when you are in possession of that set of permanent principles, you are then in a position to dramatically increase your earning power. So I'm not talking here about making money through wise investment. There are many wonderful guides for how to do that. And obviously you do need to have discretionary income to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm not talking about getting rid of debt. Those very, very important. But my friend Dave Ramsey does that better than anybody I know. And what I'm talking about is literally increasing your revenue, making more money, making sure that in the next 12 months, you make considerably more money than you made in the last 12 months. Now, I'm not saying that the principles of ancient Jewish wisdom will turn anybody into a billionaire. I'm not saying they'll turn anyone into a millionaire. In the same way that there is no choreographer or dance teacher in the whole wide world that could teach me to be a ballet dancer. It's never going to happen. Now, could a teacher make me a little bit more coordinated? Yeah, a good teacher might be able to make me a lot more coordinated, but it's very much like that with making money as well. Very much like that, in the sense that using these principles that I wrote about in my first book, Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for Making Money. I wrote about in my second book, Business Secrets from the Bible, 40 Success Strategies. And my third book, The Holistic You, integrating it all together. Those principles will show anybody how to make more money than they were making up till now.
Wow. Well, that is a fantastic introduction into your thinking and worldview. Can we talk about those principles? I mean, you've sort of tantalized myself and the audience. What are these ancient principles for increasing your revenue?
Yeah. Well, Mrs. Lapin didn't raise any dummies, and so I'd be a dummy if I didn't immediately say that the surest and best way to get a hold of these principles and to learn how to integrate them into your life is to actually go to my website at rabbidaniellapin.com and see it there. But that said, of course, there's no reason why we shouldn't take a look. There is no particular order in which they have to be taken, Robert. So I'll just I'll throw out one and explain it a little bit. And if you don't like it, tell me and we'll go to another one.
Sure. But the book, you said these came from a book that the Jews came into possession of some 3,000 years ago. Which book is that before we jump into the principles?
That would be a book called the Bible.
Ah, okay. Easy answer there.
Yeah. Look, one of the names Jews have been called is the people of the book. There are worse names they're called, but that's a pretty good name. The people of the book, and the book they're talking about is the Bible. It's also the book that more than any other volume, I mean, obviously, as you probably know, there have been more copies printed of the Bible than of any other book in human history. Right. And it's a book that has really sculpted the contours of Western civilization.
Yes.
And so it's not surprising, if you think about it, one of the big problems that worries sociologists and economists and anthropologists is, why do some countries do better than other countries? Thomas Friedman of the New York Times did very well for himself writing a book called The Earth is Flat. And what he was getting at was that with the arrival of the internet, information can be retrieved from Fifth Avenue, New York, to the middle of Chicago, to the middle of Tokyo, to the middle of the Borneo jungle, to the heart of Africa, to the middle of Mongolia. You can be anywhere at all on the planet, and you've got access to information. Secondly, the other thing that's happened as the economy has globalized and as money has been easier and easier to move, where I can now get in touch with a merchant in Korea and give him a number of a piece of plastic in my pocket and have him send me something, whatever it is I want. That's remarkable. And so since capital can flow anywhere today and does, capital crosses borders unreservedly, even before we start talking about cryptocurrency. Dollars cross borders in pursuit of investment opportunities. And so as I told a client in Kenya, Africa last week, if your business plan is good enough, people will send you money from Japan and from South Korea and from Singapore and from Taiwan and from California and from London. It doesn't matter. And so if that's a reality, which it is, by now, Thomas Friedman would have predicted that all countries would have roughly the same level of economic development, right? Because it's been more than 20 years now, 2 decades. And by now, with capital flowing freely internationally and with information available unrestrictedly, every economy around the world should be equivalent.
Isn't the problem there that property rights are not respected equally in different jurisdictions?
Well, that is very, very much a part of it. A Peruvian economist, a great guy, Hernando de Soto, actually wrote and has been working on that idea. And he's absolutely right, as are you, of course. And that is certainly part of it. However, there are places where property rights do exist, and they're still not functioning economically. So, for instance, in Ghana, Ghana has really inherited a system of government from Westminster, from London, and they've maintained it. It's basically a very fine, stable government, and property rights exist, but the economy is just not the same as the economy of Singapore, shall we say. And there are many other places like that as well. And so that's certainly one of it, but it's not the whole explanation at all. There must be something else going on. And then we notice that countries in Europe and in the United States and Australia experience significant inflows of immigration, legal and illegal. As a matter of fact, the number of people that drowned in the Mediterranean in 2019, which is the last year for which I saw figures, was over 20,000 people died by drowning in little boats that sank in the Mediterranean.
Wow.
And the question we ask ourselves is, how many of them were people trying to get from Europe to North Africa? And how many were people trying to get from North Africa to Europe?
Right.
And the answer is 100% of them were trying to get to Europe.
Right.
And the answer is, well, because obviously Europe has more financial opportunity. There's more money there in North Africa. To which the correct question is, I know that, but why? Why is it that North Africa, which has much of North Africa, has significant mineral resources? Switzerland has no mineral resources. Somalia has wide open spaces with lots of land, great agricultural land. There's minerals, bauxite, lithium, but you cannot compare Hong Kong with no natural resources to Somalia with plenty. The question is, what's going on? Why is it that you don't find it there? And this has been looked at by people like Jared Taylor with his book Guns, Germs, and Steel, and David Landis, the Wealth of Nations, and it was even touched on a little bit by the grandfather of economists, of course, the Adam Smith of The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. Everyone has looked at this question, and very reluctantly, they are drawn to a very disturbing conclusion, an extremely disturbing conclusion. So disturbing that most academics would rather ignore it than confront it. And the problem that makes it so awkward is because it is very difficult to find an alternative explanation. And again, apropos of your very good point regarding property rights, again, the question is, if property rights is the way and the avenue to prosperity, then why didn't they introduce them? I mean, this is not a hard thing to figure out.
If you are a business owner or manager, you should know these three numbers: 36,000, 25, and 1. 36,000 is the number of businesses that have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, which allows you to streamline accounting, financial management, human resources, and more. NetSuite turns 25 years old this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days rather than weeks, and to drive down cost. And finally, 1, because your business is one of a kind. So with NetSuite, you get a customized solution for all your key performance indicators in one efficient system with one source of truth. NetSuite is everything you need all in one place. Right now, you can download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/whatismoney. That's netsuite.com/whatismoney to get your free KPI checklist. Again, netsuite.com/whatismoney.
We want you to join us for 2 days of discussions and debate. which is all happening at the inaugural Dissident Dialogues 2024.
This incredible event will take place in Brooklyn on May the 3rd and 4th. You'll be joining leading thinkers such as Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, John McWhorter, Aisha Akambi, Michael Schellenberger, Mary Harrington, Chris Williamson, Winston Marshall, Konstantin Kisin, Francis Foster, and more.
Hang on a second, since when have you ever been a serious thinker?
I love thinking. It's my favourite hobby. Sometimes, of an evening, it's all I do. Think.
Moving swiftly on, we want you to join us for a gathering where everyone is part of the conversation. Conservatives, progressives, atheists, theists, left, right, and everything in between.
Dissident Dialogues presents a rare opportunity to immerse yourself in a conversation with the most influential thinkers of our time.
We'll tackle important topics relating to religion, science, politics, and culture. If you're driven by intellectual honesty, curiosity, and a desire for the truth, Dissident Dialogues is the place for you.
It's not just an event, it's the beginning of an intellectual journey, and we want you to come along for the ride. I like rides.
Dissident Dialogues is a place for dangerous ideas. Buy your tickets now at dissidentdialogues.org and be part of the conversation.
And well, there does seem to be, I'm sorry if that's a rhetorical question, but if I might proffer a short answer.
Of course.
There does seem to be a necessary moral, ethical, perhaps even theological substrate to a legal system to really get property rights in place, because there's this animalistic urge, right, to just steal every sandwich that you come across, not realizing that you're sort of unraveling the social fabric that then prevents the number of sandwiches per person or productivity from increasing, right? So there's kind of this short run, long run thing that doesn't seem so obvious, and we had to discover it, right? There's a lot of books written saying that the Protestant Reformation and the work ethic of the Quakers, I think these things contributed to the discovery of, if you will, of capitalism. So maybe that those cultural elements don't exist in some of these places, if I'm throwing out a guess.
Well, your guess is so good that we may as well pack up and go and have coffee. You've explained everything. No, you're exactly right. And you mentioned the Protestant Reformation just to show. I mean, because there are going to be some people listening to us, Robert, that are going to be saying, this is bad. You know, I tuned in hoping to hear about money. I tuned in hoping to hear something about reality. And all I'm hearing about is theological beliefs and religion. Mm-hmm. But that's the problem. And that's why it's so disturbing to the world of academia, because you put your finger on it absolutely precisely. Take a look at Holland and Belgium. Mm-hmm. These are two almost identical countries. Same weather, same land, same lack of natural resources, same racial stock of people. I mean, these two countries couldn't be more similar, excepting they couldn't be more different. Belgium is an economic basket case. They make cuckoo clocks and chocolate, and they serve as the bureaucrats of Europe. That's what they do. Holland is an economic powerhouse. It is the home to several multinational companies of gigantic financial prowess. The Shell Oil Company is a Netherlands-based company. Philips Electronics, Holland company, and many, many others. There are no huge companies, no significant companies of any success based in Belgium. What's the difference? Well, I mean, some people listening to this are going to hate this. They're going to pull their hair out. They're going to be so bothered when I give the answer. It's the answer you just gave, Robert. The answer is that Belgium is Catholic and Holland is Protestant.
Oh my goodness.
And if that's not enough to explain it, well, then you may as well take a look at North Ireland and South Ireland. North Ireland is an industrial behemoth. It always has been. The Titanic was built in the huge shipyards in Belfast. Industry all over North Ireland, lot going on. South Ireland, I mean, it's beautiful. You put it on picture postcards.
Yeah.
But there's nothing happening in South Ireland. Difference, North Ireland Protestant, South Ireland Catholic, and of course, what they euphemistically call the Troubles, the terror during the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, terrible violence between the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland. Yes, it's a reality.
Yeah.
And the trouble is that many people in because academia has become so secularized over the last few decades, there are people teaching youngsters, who pay 60 grand a year for the privilege, information that leaves out religion, because most academics have never met anybody to whom religion is important. That's not the circles in which they move. But here it is, and I could show you other examples. In why did the Industrial Revolution, say 1750 approximately, why did it launch in England, not in France?
Mm-hmm.
Why not in Germany? Daimler, Benz, Diesel, these were all German engineers later on. But in 1750, it happened in England. Well, one of the reasons is that in 1290, King Edward I banished the Jews. They threw them out of England. Why? Well, because guess who was running the banks and the finance houses in the 13th century in England? My guys,
mm-hmm.
the Hebrews,
mm-hmm.
people of Israel. And the aristocrats of England in the court of Edward I had all borrowed money, mortgaging their estates and their castles, and they were all short of money. It's very simple. It's so interesting how much of reality revolves around this thing we call money,
mm-hmm.
even though most of us can't define it in 3 or 4 simple sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And so Edward I, acceding to the beseechings of his aristocrats, they said to him, throw the Jews out of the country so we will get our mortgages back, so we don't have to pay our mortgages.
Wow. So that was a default, basically.
So it was a mass default, Jews thrown out, and a big sigh of relief from all the profligate borrowers in the English aristocracy. And Jews are kept out of England for over 300 years. And England's economy plummets, because having Jews around is actually quite helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens is the English Civil War in the middle of the 17th century, and Oliver Cromwell comes to power. Oliver Cromwell is a Bible-believing religious Christian, very much like the Pilgrims, all part of the same group in England, who came to North America in 1621. Oliver Cromwell, being an Old Testament guy, said, time we brought the Jews back. So 1660, the Jews are brought back to England. And less than 100 years later, engineers like Stephenson and Watt are starting to figure out steam power and how to build weaving machines and fabric machines. Because remember that round about the same time, we've got a guy called Thomas Malthus,
mm-hmm.
who is earning his fame in England, saying we're all doomed. It's
Right.
all over.
Right.
We're multiplying too many. We got too many people, and there's only that many sheep, and so there's a limited amount of wool, and it's very labor intensive to convert wool into yarn, and then to convert yarn into fabric, and then fabric into clothing. We're all going to die of cold before that can happen. And so he predicted mass deaths from people not being able to get clothes to wear.
Yeah.
And 1750, these engineers come up with machinery to weave fabric. And guess what? Jews have been back in England for 100 years, so there's capital. They can get money to build factories.
Mm.
And the Industrial Revolution launches in England, followed in other countries quite a while later. See, because England is Protestant, not Catholic anymore because of Henry VIII.
So can I ask you then, I don't know if you're getting to it, so forgive me if I'm jumping ahead. What is it specifically about Protestantism that makes it more amenable to capitalism than Catholicism?
We need so much more time to talk than we've got today.
Oh, we have all the time you need, man. Take your time.
But no, of course, that's a crucial question. That's the whole thing. The answer is the most, and look, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a Christian, Catholic, I'm not. But the most basic differences from the point of view of what you and I are talking about between Catholicism and Protestantism are these two things. Number one, the Catholic Church is very hierarchical. And so if I meet one of my Catholic friends, and he's retiring after, I'm thinking of a friend as I'm speaking, he's in the process of retiring after a very successful career on Wall Street in banking. And I say to him, listen, you are such a knowledgeable Catholic, and it's so nice talking with you, and you explain so many things to me, and you've been helpful to me in difficult times that I've gone through. Listen, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to fund you, and you are going to open up a beautiful Catholic church. I know just the property we can buy, and we're going to set you up. You're going to be the parish priest, and I'm guaranteeing you, people are going to come in droves because you give sermons beautifully, and you're a wise advisor, and I know you're going to run this church beautifully, and I would love to help found it. What's the next thing that happens? Absolutely nothing, because that cannot happen if it doesn't come from above. There have to be instructions from, I don't know how far up the hierarchy. I don't know if it has to go to Rome, but it certainly has to go way up. And it's extremely unlikely that he'll be allowed to open a church.
So this is a centralization, decentralization issue.
But now think about what happens. And I'm sure you know people like this. I know people like this. Guys who, I'm thinking of one guy in particular who is a pastor of a mega church. He showed up in a city, Dallas as it happens, and he started, he advertised, told a few people he was going to hold services in his living room. And his wife and kids put out chairs on Sunday morning, and a few neighbors showed up. And the next week, a few more people. And he was a captivating guy, and he really introduced people to God. And one thing led to another. They bought a church, and then they bought a bigger church. And today, when I speak at his church in Dallas, I'm speaking to 6,000 to 10,000 people. Who gave him permission to do that? Nobody. He just did it. That's a very big difference. Because entrepreneurial culture needs permission from nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important difference. And the second important difference is that Protestants are just like Hebrews in one respect, and that is study of the Bible is of great significance.
Mm.
Whereas my Catholic friends are devout and religious and God-fearing, but they're not that biblically literate.
Mm.
Because they don't do a lot of Bible themselves.
It's more ritual focused, is that right?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm too much of an ignoramus to say what it is. I better back off on that. But what I do know is that when I speak to my Protestant friends, they very often say things like, "Rabbi, while you're here, could you just tell me a little bit about Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2, verse 7?
Mm.
And they think I know it as well as they do. But my Catholic friends never ask me a Bible-related question.
Right.
And in that sense, Protestantism is very similar to Judaism. And that's why Max Weber, the German economist, wrote Protestantism and the Capitalist Ethic. And Werner Sombart, another German economist, wrote Capitalism and the Jews.
Mm.
Again, both of them latching onto this idea that exactly what you said earlier, and I wish I could quote you exactly because you said it beautifully, but to paraphrase what you said that it's in order to have those foundational requirements such as property rights and government and so on, there has to be a spiritual, theological matrix. And that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah. A substrate or substructure.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
substrate.
right.
Yeah. And there it is. You're exactly right.
Wow.
Protestantism succeeded because it had the Bible as its substrate. And so do the Jews. And that's why it is that a tiny little country in the Middle East called Israel, with 5 million Jews, is surrounded by 100 million Muslims. I'm not talking about the Gulf or Saudi Arabia. I'm talking about the contiguous states immediately touching on the borders of Israel: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. And there are 100 million Arabs there. Now, ordinarily, you relate to the gross product, the GDP of a country to its population. So, as long as culture remains the same, which you've already established. But in America, for instance, Georgia, to take an example, has about 8 times the population of Rhode Island. And so if you check the GDP of Georgia, you're not going to be shocked to discover it's about 8 times the size of Rhode Island's. And so in one area of the Middle East, you would have thought that 100 million people in those 4 countries would have about 20 times the GDP of the little country in the middle. But they don't. They're having, in aggregate, they have exactly the same GDP. 100 million people produce the same amount of wealth that 5 million people do.
Wow.
And again, the reason primarily is because of the substrate that allows to be built atop it. All the machinery of capitalism. And my point, of course, is that in the same way that these principles make it possible for countries to excel economically, they can also make it possible for individuals to succeed financially to a far greater extent than they did before. And that is, in a nutshell, that is the entire focus of my work. which is condensing ancient Jewish wisdom, thousands and thousands of pages, untranslated, into tips and tools and techniques that anybody can integrate into their lives in order to do better. And so one of them, and somehow or another we're doing exactly what I knew would happen, which is our conversation would range far and wide over this fascinating landscape. But you'd asked me to give an example of one of these tips or tools.
To the extent you could share. I mean, obviously, I'm not asking you to divulge your book here and give away the secret sauce, but the extent to which you could perhaps, in broad strokes.
Oh, sure. No, I absolutely can. Yeah. And there's no way I would be able to, in the course of an hour or something, there's no way I could convey what has been painstakingly accumulated and collected into these books. So, but to give you an example, and I think it's best illustrated by something that happened a couple of years back. We wanted to go out, have a night out, have dinner out, and just have a relaxing evening. And so we searched around the neighborhood. We phoned up some of the neighbors. We were looking for a teenage girl who would babysit for us. Uh-huh. And one of our neighbors, a lovely family, checked with their 16-year-old, and she said, sure, she'd be happy to. So she comes over, and we show her around. We introduce the kids to her, and we say, thanks for taking care of everything, and we'll see you at about 10:15. We'll be home by 10:15, then I'll take you home. She says, sure, that's great. And off we go. And she radiated a sense of competence. We really didn't worry. Uh-huh. We come home at 10:15. Children are fast asleep. The dishes had been done in the kitchen. The house was looking neat and tidy. This girl had really been busy for the last 3 hours. And so I said to her, I'm going to take you home now, but first of all, how much do I owe you? And she did something which I'm sure you've seen in your career as well. Whenever people are embarrassed about money, her eyes went down, and she's sort of looking at the floor, and her toe started tracing out patterns on the carpet. And eventually she said in a very soft voice, she said, would $20 be okay?
Wow.
And I said, no. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. It can be less. I don't mind. And I said, no, I don't agree to $20 because it's not enough.
Right.
And she looked puzzled. And she said, what do you mean? I said, we want to give you $40. And she was shocked. I can't do that. That's much too much. I said, if we make you take $40, and in 3 weeks' time, we call you and ask if you could babysit with us, what would you say? She said, yes, I would do it. I said, now do you understand why we want to give you $40? When people do not understand that you make money, you don't take money.
Yeah.
They are terribly handicapped at the process. Now, what's even worse, and I explain this in the book, what's even worse is the extent to which the culture over the last few decades has damaged people's understanding of exactly this point. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example. Have you ever seen a news report or a TV show where they are praising some wealthy philanthropist who has just made a big gift to the local hospital or the art gallery or the whatever it is. And a phrase you always hear them say is, "Oh, isn't it lovely to see somebody like this giving back to society?" Now, that's an expression that I detest. And I'll tell you why. Because if being generous and making a gift is giving back to society, what was that guy doing to society while he was making his money in the first place? Ripping it off, obviously.
Right.
Obviously ripping it off. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, you can't give, because when you say giving back, it implies that he's returning something that was taken.
And you can't believe the extent to which our audience has been indoctrinated by this idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only there. Have you ever heard politicians say the rich must pay their fair share?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Notice that they do not define what rich is.
Of course.
And notice something else. They don't define what fair is.
Nor do they define pay. It's not pay necessarily. It's extortion.
No, that's exactly right. So there again, everybody is subconsciously indoctrinated to believe that the rich are somehow getting away with not paying their taxes.
Right. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Over the past 9 years, I've been going through a pretty serious struggle with my personal health. It started with a sharp pain and stiffness in my hip after a lifting injury, which I later learned was related to some pretty extensive inflammation in my gut. Then I developed an autoimmune issue, and soon I was having joint pain all over, skin irritations, and all kinds of digestive issues. I visited many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong, but none of them were able to help me fix any of my issues. I eventually started to see an energy healer with whom I had some limited success, but it wasn't until I started working with the biohacker Anthony DiClementi last year that I was finally able to start making real progress on my healing journey. Anthony spent a lot of time with me learning about my specific situation and worked with me to adapt a custom health plan to address my needs. Anthony has served as a personal biohacker for celebrities, billionaires, and professional athletes all over the world. Besides helping people like me overcome health issues, Anthony and his world-class medical team also help guys that just want to optimize their cognitive performance, guys that want to pack on some muscle, and guys that just want to get shredded. Anthony keeps a tight book of business and is selective about the clients he brings on. To apply for Anthony's biohacking services, text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. Again, to apply for Anthony's biohacking services, just text Breedlove to 847-943-7221. Is this rooted in like a zero-sum mentality towards money?
Yes, it is. You put your finger on it yet once again. You're exactly right. Of course it is. It is directly the result of materialistic thinking. Now, see, you used such good words earlier when you said spiritual theological substrate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is the definition of spiritual? I'll tell you. The definition, that was rhetorical. The definition of spiritual is not piety or virtue or God. Those are different words. The word spiritual simply means anything that cannot be measured in a laboratory.
Interesting.
That's all spiritual is.
That maps onto the economic concept of value very nicely.
Of course.
Which is immeasurable. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Yes. And that's the whole basis of exchange.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons, I always challenge people, because I enjoy asking the question of do identical twins who have the identical DNA, right? Do identical twins have the same fingerprints or different fingerprints? It would make a nice detective novel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what is it? Well, they obviously cannot have different fingerprints because they've got the same DNA. So there is no place where data and information can come from to one of the twins and not to the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So of course they've got to have identical fingerprints, excepting they don't. And nobody knows how or why. So scientists have sort of come up with a word, just because some explanation is needed. They've come up with the word epigenetics, but nobody really knows what that means.
Yeah, somehow the
turning
environment
genes on and off.
Yeah.
Bottom line is nobody has the faintest idea. And the answer, there is a religious answer to that, and that is because fingerprints are not just fingerprints, they're soul prints. They are spiritual in the sense that they are reflective of the uniqueness of each individual.
If I could offer something here, actually. So one really, I don't know, useful or valuable definitions of the word spirit that I was told is that spirit is a pattern which propagates independent of the substrate. So it's a pattern that can manifest itself in many different mediums. And, epigenetics is this idea, right, that the environment can actually influence how our genetics manifest themselves, right? What genes are turned on and turned off, through working out, through diet, whatever it may be. And so maybe there is some that is spiritual in that sense, in a way that, like, the individual experience and path of lived experience, for lack of a better word, of the individual identical twin actually changes the way the fingerprint patterns manifest on each of them, right? So even though they have identical DNA, they don't have identical interface with the world. So therefore they have different epigenetic patterns.
I would agree with you 100%. If fingerprints developed, during your teenage years, shall we say, but in utero, they do have exactly the same environment and the same interaction.
So they come out with the fingerprints.
And yet they come out of the womb with different fingerprints.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird.
Fascinating.
Now, why is this relevant? It's relevant because if we were not unique, there would be no exchange. There would be no trade.
That's right.
Because we each would have exactly the same needs.
That's right.
It's one of the reasons that, no dog ever goes to another dog, as it were, and says, hey, listen, how about you give me a bone? You see that bone? You're not using it now. Give it to me. And in 3 weeks' time, I'll give you 2 bones back. It doesn't work like that, because they both have the same need and desire for that bone. But it's quite possible that somebody might come to me and say, hey, Rabbi Lapin, could you give me $100 and I'll give you $120 back in 3 months' time? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can do that. I don't need that $100 right now. You do. Great. Yeah. I'm happy to spend $30 a day to rent a car from Hertz. Well, they don't need the car that day. They'd much rather have $30. I'd rather have the car. We're different, because if we were the same, the trade would never be able to take place.
Bingo. Yeah, I've economists call this the inequality of exchange, right? The point of exchange happens right at that point where you value more what you are receiving than what you are giving up, and the opposite party does the same in reverse, right? They value
Yes.
more what they're receiving than what they're giving up.
But what not everybody latches onto, what is what you and me are talking about now, what not everybody latches onto is that mechanism that we're discussing, where one human being does an exchange with another human being, that mechanism creates money.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now,
Yes.
money is an amalgam of currency and value, so
Right.
we won't get too technical on that right now. But that money is
Creating value.
It's been a creation. And
Yes.
I'll give you, if I may, just a quick example of how that works, because it's important that our audience really understands how money comes into existence. Because if money just comes into existence because the government instructs the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint to churn out $100 bills, that would be the end of our problems.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
But it isn't like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Right.
And we see what happens as the United States lurches towards an inevitable financial crisis, as our national debt, the amount that is being borrowed as a result of printing money,
Mm-hmm.
Exceeds our GDP as a country.
Mm-hmm.
We've never been, this is untried territory. We've never been there before. And so printing money doesn't create money.
That's
Certainly doesn't create value. What does create value? Well, let me just sort of give you a very straight, direct example of my grandfather, who was a rabbi and a peddler. He used to go from town to town in his pickup truck. And to just give you a quick insight into an imaginary day in the life of Grandpa Lapin, you know, let's say he knocks on a door.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady answers the door. He says, "Hi, do you have anything here you don't need?" And she says, "Well, not really." He says, "Think." And she says, "Oh, well, there's an old table we're getting rid of. We don't need any more." And he says, "Right, what are you doing with it?" She says, "We put it out in the alley and the city comes by and picks it up with the other garbage on Tuesday." Grandpa Lapin says, "Do they do that for free?" She says, "No, the city never does anything for free. They're going to charge us $5 to take away the table." Grandpa Lapin says, "I got a proposal for you. How about if I give you $5, you help me load the table on my pickup, and there you go." She says, "Deal. I'm in." And they load the pickup on the truck. And you know, Grandpa Lapin, let's just abbreviate this, knocks on another door and says, "Hi." Oh, well, let's say he stops at a hardware store first.
Mm-hmm.
And he buys some nails, and there's a wobbly leg, fixes it up, buys some paint, paints the table, and he knocks on another door. And he says, "Hi, anybody here need a table?" The woman says, "Well, my daughter's getting married next week. Maybe she needs a table." So they call the daughter comes out. And she says, "Yeah." Grandpa Lapin says, "I hear you need a table." She says, "Yeah." He says, "What are you planning on doing?" She says, "Well, we were going to go down to the furniture showroom at Ethan Allen, and we were going to buy a table." Grandpa Lapin said, "How much is it going to cost you?" She says, $20. He says, "Listen, I got a deal for you. Out there on my pickup truck, I got a table. You can have it for $10. Now, mind you, it had a wobbly leg. I nailed it up. It had a scratch on the top. I painted it, but it'll only cost you $10. She says, "You know what? I'd like to save $10. Absolutely. Let's do that." So now let's just figure out the financial statement of family number one.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do a financial statement before Grandpa Lapin knocked on their door and afterwards. Before he knocked on their door, they were down $5 because they had to pay the city $5.
Mm-hmm.
After Grandpa Lapin was there, They no longer had to pay the city 5. So taking away the negative 5 is a plus 5.
Mm-hmm.
Plus Grandpa Lapin put $5 in their hand. That's another 5. And so the financial statement of family number 1 is up 10.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at family number 2. They were going to pay $20. Now they're only paying 10. So they're up 10.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget the financial statement of Ethan Allen shows no change. They didn't get a sale,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing has changed. They've still got their table.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is the aggregate increase in wealth that Grandpa Lapin has brought to this village so far? Well, we'd say $20, 10 for the first family. They're $10 better off. This is literally creation of wealth. This is not rabbinic smoke and mirrors. But that's not all. Don't forget the hardware store. They've got $1 in their till they never had before. So Grandpa Lapin has brought $21 of value to the village. Each of these families feel $10 wealthier, and they are. And the hardware store is $1 wealthier. And now here comes the really tough question, and that is, how much is left in Grandpa Lapin's pocket? What's the arbitrage here?
I made $4, right?
He made $4, exactly. Exactly. Now, a lot of people think that, as I say, this is smoke and mirrors. It isn't. I have just told you the very best definition of the first company to make serious money on the internet. It wasn't Amazon. Amazon lost money for 7 years. No, it was eBay, made money from day one. Now, what is eBay? Well, I reached out to them a few years ago to ask how many simultaneous transactions are going on at eBay at any one moment. The answer is about 70,000. And so what that really means, and this is the best definition of eBay, eBay is nothing more than 70,000 Grandpa Lapins working simultaneously. They give money to some people who sell stuff on eBay. They take money from other people who buy things from eBay. And guess what? At the end of the day, there's a few bucks in eBay's pocket. And so it's really important that people understand.
That's fantastic.
That money is not being taken. And so your very good question that launched us on this was, what is it a materialistic way of thinking? Yes, it's exactly a materialistic way of thinking. If you believe that money is not spiritual, which it is, but if you think money is physical, well, one of the characteristics of any physical object is that it can only occupy one place on the space-time continuum. And so, if I take my phone and I put it here, and then a few minutes later I look away, and when I look back again, this phone is now on your table. Well, you probably took it from me. But if this has now gone and I have money in its place, nobody took anything from me. In fact, I've gained because I did it voluntarily and consensually. And so the money you gave me must have been worth to me than what I gave you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it.
Right.
In the same way that family number 1 rather wanted to get $10 than their table, and family number 2 would rather have the table than $10, because human beings are unique.
Yes.
We each have our own desires at any given time. And so we trade. And the trading makes us wealthier. And so Somalia has plenty resources. Switzerland, no resources. So Switzerland trades and imports metal, gold, steel, and then their clever little workmen in Biel turn them into Rolex watches, and then they send those Rolex watches out and they get paid for them. Switzerland has nothing excepting the knowledge and the ability to trade. Singapore. What's the difference between Singapore and Gaza? Singapore is roughly the same size as Gaza, slightly bigger, not by much. What's the difference? The difference is Singapore trades. Gaza doesn't trade.
Thanks to my friends at Swan Bitcoin for supporting the show. Swan sponsored the Sailor series, and I appreciate their support from the very beginning of the What is Money show, and I'm happy to welcome them back. Swan has grown a lot since then. They've built a full-service Bitcoin-centric financial services company with several different offerings. With the Swan app, you can set up instant and recurring Bitcoin buys. And with this, you can get started at swan.com/breedlove. Swan also enables clients in the US to hold Bitcoin directly in an IRA account, so you can hold Bitcoin in a tax-advantaged way. Get started at swan.com/IRA. If you're looking to buy more than $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, check out Swan Private. You'll get concierge support for buy execution, retirement accounts, inheritance and estate planning, and access to exclusive events, research, and other content. Get started at swan.com/private. Swan Institutional provides financial services to institutions, including Bitcoin-backed lending, asset management, principal investments, Bitcoin services for financial advisors, and Bitcoin mining operations. For those new to Bitcoin, I recommend checking out Swan's Welcome to Bitcoin course at swan.com/welcome. So go to swan.com/breedlove today to get started on your Bitcoin buying journey. Are you sick of being robbed by politicians through inflation and endless money printing? If so, you need to be at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee on July 25th through 27th. As the largest Bitcoin and Fintech conference in the world, Bitcoin 2024 stands as a beacon of monetary freedom, a glimmer of hope amongst a darkening macroeconomic backdrop. Top speakers, companies, and thought leaders from across the industry will convene in Nashville to look ahead to the next year and beyond. I will be there, and Bitcoin conferences like this have become my favorite place to socialize since becoming a Bitcoiner. Ticket prices will increase soon. Get your tickets now and secure your spot at this game-changing event. So go to b.tc/conference and use discount code BREEDLOVE to sign up for the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Again, that's b.tc/conference, discount code BREEDLOVE.
As you were saying that Switzerland has the know-how, and that just was occurring to me that is Ayn Rand's point that the mind is the source of all wealth.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what you're describing here is that there is a very specific process by which we can increase the quantity of goods produced per person. And that is the process of free market capitalism or consensual trade. And this is the key point I wanted to get to, is that it's trade that is centered on consent on both sides that creates value.
Outstanding. That's exactly the way to put it.
Once you remove the element of consent and it becomes a coerced exchange, you have the opposite. You have the destruction of value. Or you certainly don't have the creation.
A socialist economy works that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that, this is kind of the tricky thing about money, I guess, is that, the money, it's not the money is not the goods that it represents. It's not the wealth that it represents. It's a representative of wealth, but it's the thing that facilitates consensual exchange, which increases the wealth per capita, which then becomes represented in more valuable money, right? The money has more purchasing power as we produce more goods per person, or, which is saying the same thing, we increase our productivity.
Yes.
And so, but it seems like people maybe get tricked up there. They think that, money, because money is maybe finite in quantity, that somehow it's a zero-sum game. To make money, I need to take money from someone else, but that's not the case, as you just described, right? Through the process of consensual exchange,
that's
you can actually make the money more
when
valuable.
I say that in Thou Shalt Prosper, the 10 Commandments for making money, one of those points is learning the intrinsic dignity and morality of trade and of doing business, of babysitting for my family, or paying me to write your business plan, or whatever it is. interacting with other human beings. And so I will hire Walter, the great German mechanic downtown, to fix my BMW, even though I really enjoy tinkering with cars.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be dumb for me to do that, because I can attend to a client, 3 clients in the time it would have taken me to fix the car, and I wouldn't have done it so well. And so I'm happy to let Walter do that, and I pay him his rates very happily, because I used the time he gave me to achieve greater value.
Yeah, well, maybe this is where it sort of reaches into that moral or theological substrate, in that for this system of value creation to work, there must be mutual consent in every exchange. For there to be mutual consent in every exchange, you need mutual respect for one another as individuals, right? Respect for the life, liberty, and property of one another. And, those moral intuitions are largely derived, at least in the West, from the Bible, as far as I can tell.
Yes, particularly when you add in one more ingredient, also essential, and that is trust. I'm not going to trade with you if I don't trust you. And so where does trust come from? And that's the only way a currency works, is that the minting authority has widespread consensual acceptance. And number 2, the region in which it operates is populated by people who trust one another. And so when the European Economic Union began to be formed in the 1950s, in the aftermath of World War II, part of their goal was to make it impossible for Germany to start a third war. And part of their goal was to emulate the United States of America. We are the United States of America, so why don't we become the United States of Europe? Because if you can unify large groups of people, you can build a very powerful economy. And that didn't work and is not working for several important reasons. But, and in the United States, it's no longer working as reliably as it did in the 1940s and 50s, because it is no longer one nation under God. It's now at least 2 nations. And whether you want to divide us as, pro-Trump or anti-Trump voters, or whether you want to divide us as Republicans or Democrats, or you want to divide us as people who are university-centric and people who are not, again, people who are idea-centric, people who make their living with ideas, and people who make their living with things. It doesn't make any difference. But never before in the last 248 years has this country been as ununited as it is right now. And not surprisingly, this has a very serious economic impact.
Absolutely. So perhaps now it would be the right time to talk about Bitcoin as money then, because as you're saying that, well, money is to some extent based on the trust individual users of the money have in the issuing authority, not to abuse the trust that's been placed in them as the widespread issuer. So it really comes down to the credibility of the money itself, right? Like how much do you believe these people are going to do what they say in terms of monetary policy? Or in the case of Bitcoin, how much do you believe this algorithm is going to do what it says in terms of money supply and whatnot? So how do you then compare the two, say human-based monetary systems and algorithmic-based monetary systems?
It's all a case of what people believe. I'm echoing what you just said, and I agree with you 100%. money is essentially the result of what a large group of people believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, if let's imagine that the eclipse across parts of the United States on Monday, as it approached, it wasn't an eclipse, but it was a meteorite that was going to destroy the planet.
Mm-hmm.
As the information spread that this is what was going to happen, what happens to the value of our dollar?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it plummets. It has no value at all.
Mm-hmm.
If, on the other hand, we could persuade people that everything's going to be okay, you don't have to worry. Inflation's going to be under control. There's not going to be any military adventures. There's going to be peace and prosperity. If somehow we could inject that message into the hearts and minds of every American, the value of the dollar would skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a case of belief.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Bitcoin, for instance, plummeted, when was it? Late 2021 or early 2022, somewhere there, right?
I don't actually recall.
I think when its value dropped there, again, it was all that had happened was beliefs shifted. There was information came out about whether there'd be regulation and whether the things were being spoken about. People were saying, influential people were saying, we're no longer going to accept Bitcoin, and Bitcoin uses up too much fossil fuel to mint. And so the value dropped by about, I think it fell to about a third of its value.
Right.
It's all a case of what people think and believe.
Right.
And now we're seeing, obviously, people are losing confidence in the US dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very likely that in the same way that the British pound sterling stopped being the world reserve currency in 1944 towards the end of World War II, it's very likely that the US dollar is going to cease to be the world reserve currency because of the way it is being destroyed right now. And that would be very, very bad news, but it's very likely that that would happen. The more I say this, the more I'm harming the value of the dollar. The more people hear me say it, the more I'm harming the value of the dollar. And so the the value of the Bitcoin, of the cryptocurrency, will always depend on what people believe it to be. And for that reason, one of the things that happens is its volatility, precisely because there is not a known quantity. The United States of America, the full faith and credit, people like those phrases. And so for many, many years, the dollar retained real value. There never has been anything like that for Bitcoin, excepting an algorithm that none of us understand. And so we watch the volatility of Bitcoin and we say, you know what, whether this is a currency or not, whether I'm ever going to be able to use this to buy a car, or whether I'm ever going to be able to use this to pay my bills, one thing is for sure, and that is, I think its value is going to go up because I think more and more people are going to see it. So I'm going to get some, not because I think it's going to be useful to spend, but because I think its value is going to go up. And in a paradoxical kind of a way, of course, that undermines its usefulness as a currency. Because one thing we want in currency is stability.
So this is quite the little philosophical rabbit hole to go into, I think.
I'm really sorry, Robert. I just have to say that I have to duck off in 6 minutes. I have another interview coming up.
Very good. We'll wrap it up right here then. So I think to the extent that we define belief as the ideas which inform our actions, rather than just, propositional phrases we rattle off, right? That beliefs do inform what increases or decreases the value in the marketplace, because well, it's not enough to just believe. You actually have to buy it or sell it, right, to actually impact the value of the thing in the marketplace.
Yeah, right.
And so we might say the bet on Bitcoin is something like a belief that others will believe in the credibility of its monetary properties, which is like, oh, this thing is actually useful. Other people don't understand it yet, but they will.
And so I look at its value, and I look at the various companies that are keeping it in their portfolios, and I say, yeah, look, a lot of people are smarter than me believe in it, so I'm going to believe in it too.
Bingo. So let me ask you one last question then, because this is interesting. If money is defined by what people believe, as expressed in their actions, obviously, does that mean money is quasi-religious?
Oh, man. There's not a single time you've opened your mouth that you haven't won a prize. Bingo. Of course. That's why no atheistic regime has ever succeeded in building a successful economy. It's not a coincidence, whether it's Cuba or North Korea or any other. Every single time Western countries or South American countries have embarked on Marxist adventures, the economies have plummeted every single time. It is absolutely reliable. If you strip faith out of the picture, money loses its value. Yes, of course, it's belief. And the same way, right, if I work out at the gym and I've really built my upper body strength, and come the weekend and my wife asks me she wants to rearrange the furniture. Now I'm able to use the strength I built in the gym to carry heavy furniture around the house. In the same way, if the gym is religion, and through religion I build faith, it's not an accident that I can then use that faith for economic purpose. It's not an accident that history's greatest engine of financial prosperity, the United States, prints on its money, "In God we trust." Yeah, it's kind of linked.
Wow. That's fantastic stuff. Rabbi Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a very fascinating conversation. Where can people find you on the internet?
The website is rabbidaniellapin.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Happy to hear from people.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this very fascinating journey.
Likewise. So did I. And didn't we do great with the conversation?
Yeah, I think so. It was a very enjoyable journey. You did a great job touring me through history there. So really appreciate it.